Hello, everyone. My name is Mrs. Scheck, and I am the principal at Montgomery School in Fort St. John. I have a book today that I really enjoy. It's called Hide and Sneak, and it's written by Canadian author Michael Arvaarluk Kusugak, and it's illustrated by a really good illustrator called Vladyana Krykorka. In the book, you'll see lots of different colors, and if you look really closely, you'll see some printing in the book from the Inuktitut language. You'll also see some really cool artwork with some special effects called watercolor, and you might even see some sprinkles of salt if you look really closely. One thing about this book, it has a really important lesson in it. So at the end, I'm wondering if you have been able to figure out the lesson, and if so, you can let me know. Here we go. One fine summer day, Alashua said, "I am going out to play hide and seek, Mum." Her mother said, "Don't go too far away. An Ijirak might hide you, and if an Ijirak hides you, no one will ever find you again." You can see that they live far north. "Yes, Mom," Alashua said, and she went out of her tent and into the sunshine. Tiny flowers covered the ground, and the water on the lake behind her tent was so still she could see the sky in it. A loon made a long V in the water as it swam on the lake. On the sea in front of her tent, the floats on a net were lined up neatly in the still water. When all the floats are floating on the water, there are no fish in the nets, and they were all floating. On a hill, an Kusugak stood quietly looking out over the land and sea. It had to stand quietly because it was made of rocks, piled one on top of the other to look like a man. Alashua looked at it and wondered why anyone would pile big heavy rocks on top of each other to look like a man. She said to herself, "I'll have to remember to ask my father what it is for." But of course, she forgot. Now, if you look at the illustration, you can see all the little piles of rocks that look like Inuktituts. She ran off to play hide and seek with her friends. Alashua loved to play hide and seek, but she was not very good at it. As she skipped along looking for a place to hide, a bright yellow butterfly fluttered by, and Alashua ran after it, yelling, "Kitsukuk, kitsukuk, kitsukuk." That is, of course, the way you make a butterfly so tired it will fall down so you can catch it. But soon Alashua got so tired she had to stop and sit down, and she forgot to hide. You see, Alashua was not very good at hide and seek. And just like in the previous page, where we saw the Inuktituts around the edges, now we see butterflies and the words in Inuktitut. When Alashua was looking for a place to hide again, she came to a pond beside a rocky hill. Tiny, prickly fish darted across the pond floor and disappeared under the rocks. She stopped to take a closer look. There was a big black bug crawling along the pond floor. It looked like a beetle just meandering along on its short black legs. Then there were tweeny, tiny fish that she thought looked like they did not have any skins at all. She could see their skeletons and all of their insides. They swam around just the same, without a care in the world. There were little round red bugs that moved about from here to there with no sign of any legs or fins. But she was most fascinated by the Ukapiliak, a tiny turtle-like creature in a fragile-looking shell. It had a pointy tail and swam along by tickling the water with the many fingers on its undersides. Alashua watched these bugs for a long time, and she completely forgot to hide again. And again she lost her turn. She was not very good at hide and seek. Later, when Alashua was looking for a place to hide, she came upon a nest of tiny baby birds. The baby birds lifted their tiny beaks up to her and chirped, "Cheep, cheep, cheep, cheep." Elashua got on her knees, puckered up her lips, and replied, "Cheep, cheep, cheep." And from somewhere behind her, Elashua heard some whistling and a tiny voice singing, "Hide and sneak, how I love to hide and sneak." Elashua looked around, but there was no one there. There were rocks and flowers and old squaw ducks on a lake, but they weren't whistling or singing. She scratched her head and went back to the little birds. She puckered up her lips again to talk to them, but behind her, there was the little voice again. "Hide and sneak, how I love to hide and sneak. I hide and you seek, you won't find me for a week." Elashua looked around. She didn't see anybody, but she heard the whistling and singing and laughing like someone was having a good time. She looked, and finally, behind a big rock, she found a tiny little man. He was dressed in a fur coat that looked like ptarmigan feathers in summer. His brown legs were bare, and he had nothing on his feet at all. Like a ptarmigan in summer, he was very hard to see. Elashua knew she had met an Ijurak, a hide-and-sneak creature. The little man laughed and cackled and danced as he sang his little song. As soon as he saw Elashua, he skipped away to hide behind a rock. But as he did so, he tripped on the rock and went tumbling along the ground. Elashua laughed and ran after him. He was a shy little man, but soon he began to play with Elashua. He loved to play hide and seek, and he was very good at it. Elashua said, "I'm not very good at hiding." The Ijurak said, "I am very good at hiding. Let me help you." Oh, that sounds kind of dangerous. Elashua thought, "This guy's an Ijurak, and my mother said if an Ijurak hides you, no one will ever find you again. But he is such a happy, fun-loving little man. Elves don't hide you forever. Dwarves don't hide you forever. Leprechauns don't hide you forever. I think my mother is wrong." So Elashua said, "Okay." Elashua and the Ijurak skipped up the hill with the Kusugak on it. As they skipped down the other side, the Ijurak tripped on a rock again and went tumbling down. Elashua laughed and laughed. He was such a funny fellow. They skipped and sang across a rocky field. They skipped around a lake. They skipped and danced through a big field of cotton grass. Finally, they came to a small creek with fish fins sticking up out of the water. As they stepped into the water to skip across, the fish jumped and water splashed everywhere. They skipped across and hid in a cave that Elashua had never seen before. Elashua looked all around. She did not have the foggiest idea where they were. She asked, "Where are we? I have never seen this place before." The Ijurak replied, "We are in my special hiding place. Here no one will ever find us." They hid. They hid for a long time. The Ijurak beamed with pride at being such a good hider. Lunchtime came and went, and still no one found them. The Ijurak laughed and cackled and sang his little song. He was having a wonderful time. But Elashua was getting hungry. She decided no one would ever find them again, and that suited the Ijurak just fine. Elashua said, "I want to go home now." The Ijurak replied, "But they haven't found us yet." "But I'm hungry and I want to go home now," Elashua insisted. "Well, you can't," the Ijurak said, getting annoyed at Elashua. That cave looks really dark. Elashua wanted to go home. She was getting awfully hungry, and now she missed her mother too. But the Ijurak was not going to let her go home. Then she had a terrific idea. She looked straight at the Ijurak and she said to him, "You look funny." The Ijurak looked at her and said, "Don't look at me." But Elashua kept right on staring at him. "Your nose is crooked," she said, teasing the Ijurak. The Ijurak's face turned bright red. He was so shy. But Elashua kept staring straight at him. She could not look away now, for if she did, she knew he would disappear. "Don't look at me," the Idurak said again. "You're a clumsy little oaf, always tripping over things," said Alashua. "Don't stare at me," he said, and his face was red hot. "Only if you take me home," she said. "No," replied the Idurak. Red face, reddest in the human race, na, 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 na," Alashua teased. Well, the Idurak was so shy he could not stand it any longer, and he said, "Okay, I will take you home, but don't stare at me any more." They left the cave. They skipped along again until they came to the tiny creek. There were the fish again, their fins sticking up out of the shallow water. Even before her feet touched the water, Alashua knew something was going to happen, but it was too late. She did not dare take her eyes away from the Idurak. They jumped into the water. The fish jumped, splashing water everywhere. The water splashed on Alashua's dress. It splashed on Alashua's hair, and it splashed into Alashua's eyes. Alashua blinked. When she opened her eyes, the Idurak was gone. Poof! Gone, just like that. Alashua looked around, but the Idurak was nowhere to be found. She looked everywhere. Still there was no Idurak. She was alone. She didn't know where she was, and she was lost. Alashua began to cry. "Oh, I want my mommy. Oh, I want to go home." She cried for a long time, but no one came. She cried until her eyes turned as red as the Idurak's face. She cried until she had no cry left in her body. Then, finally, she stopped crying. Wonder how she's going to find herself or find her way home. Alashua didn't know what to do. She looked all around. Way, way, way far away, so far away she could hardly see it, there was a black dot on a hill. It was the only thing she saw on the horizon. Alashua wondered what it was. She said to herself, I think I'm going to go there. She started to walk. She walked across a field of cotton grass. The black dot on the hill looked a little bigger. She skipped around a lake. Now the black dot on the hill seemed to be standing. She skipped and danced across a large rocky field. Now the dot looked like a man standing on the hill. She went up the hill and walked over to it. It was an Kusugak, standing quietly looking out over the sea and land. Alashua said, I have seen this Kusugak before. She looked around to where the Kusugak was looking. There was a river, there was a sea and the land, and way down on the shore there was a tent. She looked and looked at the tent. It was her tent. She was so happy. She said thank you to the Kusugak and skipped and ran all the way home. Her mother and father and brothers and sisters were so happy to see her. They hugged her and kissed her and asked, Where have you been, Alashua? We have been worried about you. On the other side of the hill playing hide and seek, she replied. She told them about playing hide and seek. She told them about the Idurak, and she told them about being lost. Then she asked her father, Father, what is an Kusugak for? It's to help you find your way home, he replied. She said, You know what, Father? It works. When Alashua saw her friends again, they said she was such a good hider. They had looked for her everywhere, but they could not find her. Alashua was very proud. She still loved to play hide and seek, and she still was not very good at it, but she really didn't mind. There were always butterflies to chase and tiny bugs to look at. It was fun anyway, and she always sang a little song. Hide and sneak, how I love to hide and sneak. I hide and you seek, you won't find me for a week. And she never, ever, ever saw an Idurak again. Iduraks are so hard to see, just like ptarmigan in summer. Now, what do you think the message of that book was? Was it about making sure you don't go too far from home? Thanks for tuning in, friends. We'll see you again soon.